Well, fantasy football season starting in the next couple weeks, and fantasy drafts for most people coming up this weekend. Well, next, here's the top 40 wide receivers I'm ranking going into the year. Number one, Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins. I know a lot of people got CeeDee Lamb as their number one wide receiver going into the season, but I still believe Tyreek Hill has a couple more monster years left in him. CeeDee Lamb, it was the first time in his career we put up numbers like that. And Tyreek Hill's in a more explosive offense and a better scheme as well. I know Tyreek Hill's smaller wide receiver. He's in his 30s now, where the decline starts a little bit. But I don't see Tyreek Hill slowing down with his speed and just the way he plays the game and the trust Mike McDaniel and this offense has in him and the rapport him and Tua have with each other. So Tyreek Hill is my number one wide receiver this year. Number two, CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. So CeeDee Lamb's still holding out for this Dallas Cowboy team, and we'll see if a report, and I believe he will towards the end of training camp, where he got to skip it all and still gets his money. So CeeDee Lamb over 1,700 yards last season, double-digit touchdowns, over 130 catches. What a year it was. And the Cowboys, they added nobody in the draft or free agency that's really going to take targets or plays away from CeeDee Lamb. So him and Dak Prescott were on the same wavelength last season. They had a big year, no doubt about it. But CeeDee Lamb, I know, like I said, most people have him as their number one, but he's my number two receiver this season. Number three, Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. Ja'Marr Chase, he's penciled in as that number three receiver on most websites and in most people's opinion. But I believe Amon-Ra St. Brown's a little more consistent. He's a better catcher of the football and gets more receptions as well than Chase. I know Chase is more of a game breaker, but there's those games at times as well where Ja'Marr Chase isn't going to have those big games where Amon-Ra, his floor is better than Ja'Marr Chase's floor, and I know his ceiling's higher as Ja'Marr Chase, but I just want more consistency week in and week out. But you can't go wrong with any of these top five options, as I mentioned. But right now, I believe Amon-Ra, he just keeps getting better as the year's going on. He's been a PPR machine. Him and Jared Goff, great rapport in this offense for this Detroit Lion team. And this year, I'm big on Amon-Ra once again. Before Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings, I know Jefferson's ranked fifth out of these wideouts, but you can't go wrong with any of them. But I just prefer Justin Jefferson. I believe he's the best wide receiver overall in all of NFL. But even though this is fantasy football and he's number four in my rankings at the position, and it doesn't matter the quarterback. I know Sam Darnold's going to be the starter this season. J.J. McCarthy, he got hurt. He's out for the year. But last season we saw with Joshua Dobbs and Nick Mullins, Jefferson was still putting up numbers. Now coming off an off-season where he got his contract and he's healthy and happy as Justin Jefferson. I believe he goes into the year once again and has a big season. So, like I said, I know his quarterback isn't great compared to a Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, and Amon-Ra St. Brown or Ja'Marr Chase. But I just believe talent alone will get Justin Jefferson up there in the top 3 or 4 once again. Number 5, Ja'Marr Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals. A solid year last season, including a big game where he had 190 yards and 3 touchdowns in was his highlight. But Joe Burrow going down hurt Chase's value, no doubt about it, last season where he missed half the year was Joe Burrow. But Ja'Marr Chase, he's been holding out a little bit, but supposedly he's at camp and ready to go for the Cincinnati Bengal team, even though no new contract has signed. So I know people prefer him as the number 3 receiver overall, but Ja'Marr Chase, like I said, his ceiling might be higher than a Amon-Ra St. Brown, but his floor is lower than a St. Brown and a Justin Jefferson, where T. Higgins over there. And also as well, some games Joe Burrow puts in stinkers at times, so I prefer Chase as my number 5 receiver, but you can't go wrong with any of the top 5. Number 6, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. A.J. Brown, it was a monster year once again for him last year, over 1,400 yards for A.J. Brown. Had a nice contract as well in the offseason re-signing. And this Eagle team, they want to get back to the Super Bowl and win the whole thing. And signing Saquon Barkley, getting A.J. Brown under a new contract, and with his explosiveness and his route running ability and the physicality he plays at the wide receiver position, I think A.J. Brown once again is in for a good season. For 7, Puka Nacua of the Los Angeles Rams. Puka Nacua, one of the best pickups in all of fantasy football history, I believe. Puka Nacua, 5th-round pick last season, came out of nowhere, caught over 90 passes last season, over 1,400 yards, had a big season. And this year, once again, I believe it's a big year for Puka Nacua. Going into the year, I actually had him as my number 6 wide receiver, but with the injury, and I think A.J. Brown is just going to have that great season. Once again, I moved Puka down a slot, but you can't go wrong with Brown and Puka Nacua. These are the decisions fantasy owners are going to have to make draft day, obviously. But like I said, these guys are neck and neck in the rankings here, Brown and Puka Nacua. And Puka Nacua, his numbers might take a little bit of hit. We aren't going to take him as a surprise like they did early last season. But still, I believe Puka Nacua, 1,100, 1,200 yards, 8-10 touchdown range, 90 to 100 balls he catches, and has another great season. Number 8, Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. I know people have Wilson in that 6, even 5 spot going into fantasy leagues. But Garrett Wilson, I know last season over 1,000 yards with bad quarterback play. Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle for the New York Jets. This season, Aaron Rodgers back and healthy as of now, ending training camp and going into the regular season. But I believe this New York Jet team are still going to rely on the run a lot this season with Breece Hall in the backfield. And Aaron Rodgers, you don't want him at 40 years old throwing the football 35, 40 times per game. So I know Garrett Wilson's a great talent, no doubt about it. But I prefer guys like A.J. Brown and Puka Nacua over him. But still, at the number 8 spot, it's a solid place to be going into the year. Number 9, Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. So Marvin Harrison, one of the highly touted prospects in the last decade, I believe, coming out at the wide receiver position. And obviously Hall of Fame father Marvin Harrison Sr. with the Indianapolis Colts all those years ago with Peyton Manning. And if Marvin Harrison is anything close to his father, he's going to have a great career. And he's got a great situation he's coming into as well. Most wide receivers, they coming into the league and playing with horrible quarterbacks. But Kyler Murray, I believe, is one of the better quarterbacks in terms of driving the football down the field, getting his target the football. I know Murray, at times he runs too much, holds on to the football a lot. But Marvin Harrison, he's going to put up numbers. He's got that number 1 receiver ability already coming into the year. And it's my number 9 wide receiver. And taking him mid-second, early third, I think is good value for a guy who could possibly put up those monster ball games and has an unlimited ceiling. Number 10, Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints. So Chris Olave last season, it was a weird type of year for Olave with Derek Carr's first season at quarterback for the Saints. But Olave finished with over 1,100 yards once again, caught 80 passes on the year. And once again, going into the year, I don't think this Saint team is going to be really that good. And Olave, one of the better route runners and up-and-coming receivers over the last few seasons. So I know the situation isn't great, but there's not much competition. Rashid Shaheed's the number 2 receiver. Michael Thomas is gone. No one signed him up this season. So Olave coming into the year, I like him at 10, where I know other sites and rankings have Drake London over him, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans. But I believe Chris Olave this season has a good one. Number 11, Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons. So Drake London, this could be the breakout season for London. Now with a real quarterback behind center, Kirk Cousins coming in, signing the $100 million deal. After the last couple of years, Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke, and Desmond Ridder, Drake London had to deal with at the quarterback position. And obviously, those guys are bottom of the barrel and didn't get the job done over there in Atlanta. But Drake London with Kirk Cousins, we know Cousins is a gunslinger. He's got an accurate ball. He gets that football down the field, throws for a whole lot of yards. And also on the fast track over there indoors in Atlanta. I think Drake London has a great season. Best season of his career. Number 12, Cooper Kupp of the Los Angeles Rams. So as the weeks have went on, I've moved Kupp up as well in my rankings. Going into last season off the bat, he was hurt with a hamstring injury, and that set him back, obviously. Going into this year, he's healthy as Cooper Kupp. Still one of the best route runners. Still some of the best stands in all pro football is Cooper Kupp. And in PPR leagues, now teams are really going to have to zero in, obviously, on Puka Nacua and Kyren Williams out of the backfield for this Los Angeles Ram team. So I believe Cooper Kupp coming into the year is going to have that upside once again. And like I said, health did him in last season, but now coming in healthy and a whole off season to train and just get right. I think he has a good year as a number 1 back-end receiver. Number 13, Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Mike Evans last season, what a year was in his first season with Baker Mayfield. Mike Evans, where with Tom Brady, he struggled and dropped passes the season prior, but him and Baker, great rapport. Mike Evans, 10th year in a row, only player in NFL history, 10 seasons to begin a career with 1,000 yards. And I know Mike Evans, some sites he's higher, some sites he's lower, but I think at the number 13 spot is a good spot for Mike Evans. He's a big-time wide receiver. I don't think he's going to slow down, and he still could burn by his secondary. 14, Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. So Nico Collins, what a breakout season it was for him last year, where he was going in the back end in the last 3-4 rounds of fantasy drafts, where him and CJ Stroud on the same rapport. He got a big contract in the offseason as Nico Collins, and rightfully so. But I think the numbers could take a little bit of a hit with Stephon Diggs coming in a trade with the Buffalo Bills. Tank Dell entering his second season healthy this year. But Nico Collins, I think he's a big-time type of wide receiver and one of the quicker and underrated receivers in the league. Number 15, Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. So Davante Adams, he's going back into the first, mid-second on some platforms like ESPN, Yahoo Sports, but I'm not big into Davante Adams this season. I know Gardner Minshew, he's won the quarterback job going into the season over Aiden O'Connell, which maybe is a plus. Minshew's a gunslinger, but also at times he throws way too much as Minshew and gets in trouble and turns the football over. And also Davante Adams, 32 years old, we're going to start seeing numbers going down. And over the last 2 seasons, numbers have gone down. Obviously, he's not playing with an Aaron Rodgers anymore as Davante Adams. But like I said, a lot of bad hits he's taken over the last couple seasons. He's in an offense that is mid to the back end, I believe, of the league. And this season, I don't like Adams that great. Late second rounder, third rounder, I think it's all right for Adams. 16, Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers. So right now, Brandon Ayuk still trying to hammer out the details of his contract with San Francisco. Will possibly get traded, but Deebo Samuel, if he's healthy, he's an explosive wide receiver. We know he can run all the routes. We know they use him as a running back and gadget guy at times as well is San Francisco, but a lot of mouths to feed on this offense. Like, say if Brandon Ayuk got traded, I think I would move Deebo Samuel up a couple slots in my rankings, but right now, as a number 2 wide receiver, I still think he's fine on your roster is Deebo Samuel. Number 17, Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. So Jalen Waddle, who was a down year a little bit last year, but still had over 1,000 yards, was Waddle. Still over 70 balls caught. And if he's just healthier coming into the year, and he got a contract as well in the offseason, I think Jalen Waddle could have a good year for this Miami Dolphin team. We saw the last couple years he was top 15 in receiver. Last year finishing top 20 at the wide receiver position. And I believe Jalen Waddle, as long as he's healthy, him and Tua have a great rapport. Defenses are still going to put all their effort into Tyreek Hill, and Waddle will get that one-on-one coverage. And I think he's a solid number 2 receiver for owners this year. 18, DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. So I don't think DJ Moore is going to match the season he had last season with Chicago, where he had up to 1,400 yards and a monster year was with Justin Fields, where him and Fields had a good rapport. But this offseason, a lot of changing parts in this offense. Obviously, Caleb Williams, first overall pick for the Chicago Bear team. Then Rome Odunze they took early in the first round as well with their second pick in the round. Keenan Allen they traded for with Chicago. So a lot of mouths to feed on offense. Signing DeAndre Swift, Cole Kmet still there as well. But DJ Moore still is a number 2 wide receiver and someone in the back end I still believe will get 1,100, 1,200 yards is DJ Moore. Anywhere from 6 to 8 touchdown range. But like I said, with all those guys over there, it's just the odds are his numbers are going to go down. Number 19, Malik Neighbors of the New York Giants. And maybe I'm high on Malik Neighbors than other people are going into the season. But this New York Giant team, they just don't have anyone on the offense, really. Saquon Barkley left in free agency. He signed on with division rival, the Philadelphia Eagles. And Malik Neighbors, he was a first-round pick for a reason from this Giant team. If he went to another team, let's say, with a better quarterback like Marvin Harrison did, he would be in the top 15 easily, I believe, in the rankings going into the year. So Malik Neighbors, he's a generational talent, one of the better wide receivers to come out as well. And this season, going into the year, a lot of great wide receivers and a deep receiver class compared to last season. Malik Neighbors, he's going to get force-fed with targets. I know Daniel Jones, he hasn't looked good over the last season and change, and especially in the last preseason game. But still, Neighbors played that game at 4 catches, 55 yards. And with his explosiveness and getting peppered with targets this year, he's going to work his way into a low-end 1, number 2 receiver, number 20, Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers. So I'm assuming Ayuk's going to stay the way things are looking. Him and the Niners are looking to hammer out a contract, and they've been talking with Ayuk now over the last couple of weeks, where there were reports him and the Steelers had a deal, possibly, but the Niners want to keep Ayuk and trying to work out a deal. So Ayuk last season, he had a big first half of the season. Then the second half, he tailed off a little bit, but still over 1,200 yards Ayuk had and over 70 catches. And once again this year, I think he has a good season, but like I said, a lot of mouths to feed on San Francisco. Debo, Christian McCaffrey's going to get anywhere from 65, 80 catches on the year. George Kittle, still one of the better tight ends in all pro football. Brandon Ayuk is down in my rankings compared maybe to other websites and stuff. 21, Stephon Diggs of the Houston Texans. A lot of people down on Diggs coming into the year. Last season, he had over 1,100 yards. Once again, he's Diggs. I know it was Josh Allen, but he's coming into a great situation with C.J. Stroud at the quarterback position, where a lot of people say this kid's poised, and it's like he's been a 10-year veteran, and he's entering a great wide receiver room with Nico Collins, who I mentioned early in the video there, Tank Dell, who had a breakout first half of the year before he got hurt in his rookie season. But Stephon Diggs knows it's a contract season, and he just wants to go out there and win his Stephon Diggs. So I think Stephon Diggs, he could have a good season. I'm obviously going to take him in that late third, fourth round range, where the last couple of years he was going late first, early second. So Stephon Diggs, I still believe a back end number 2, 3 receiver for owners. 22, DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. So DK Metcalf, he might be low to people on this list, but he hasn't finished in the top 20 in PPR leagues at the receiver position in points. And DK Metcalf, new offense this season. Pete Carroll, not the head coach, a whole new coaching staff. But still Geno Smith at quarterback, and maybe a couple years ago was fluky a little bit with Geno Smith. But DK Metcalf, we know he's going to go out there. We know he's a physical specimen. He's going to put up some big games here and there. We saw last season a 200-yard, 3-touchdown game at the Dallas Cowboys. But inconsistencies are going to be the problem at times. And they got players as well there on that offense. Tyler Lockett, even though I think he's on his last legs. JSN, Smith-Njigba, second-year wide receiver where he could take the next step. I still believe Metcalf will get his numbers, but this receiver position is so deep this season going into the year. 23, Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts. So last season, it was a good year for Pittman Jr. with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. But now Minshew gone, went to the Vegas Raiders in free agency. Anthony Richardson, he's healthy. He's going to be the quarterback. And we know Richardson, he's going to run the football a whole lot going into the year. But I still believe Michael Pittman is going to put up some numbers, and he's a solid wide receiver, especially as a back end 2 wide out or 3 wide out for some fantasy owners. So right now, Michael Pittman, even with Richardson at quarterback and some targets are going to go away, they really didn't bring much in the offseason. I know they drafted the rookie Mitchell, but Josh Downs is hurt. Alec Pierce really hasn't shown much, and I like Pittman once again this year as a solid option. 24, Devonta Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Devonta Smith, you know he'll have some monster games, 30, 35-point games, and then games where he don't get the football a lot and only scores 7-8 fantasy points. But Devonta Smith's an explosive wide receiver. Last season, I thought he was going too high in fantasy drafts, but right now, 4th, 5th round is perfect range for Devonta Smith, and I think he's a perfect number 2 wide receiver for fantasy owners on their fantasy team. So in a high-powered offense with a lot of good weapons, it's going to be more of the same with Smith. He'll get 1,000 yards. He'll have those monster games and then games where you don't see much on the stat line. 25, T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. T. Higgins, he's been moving up my draft board of late. And T. Higgins, we know he's been a top 12 finisher in his NFL career. On a 1-year franchise tag prove-it deal was T. Higgins. He wanted the long-term extension going into the offseason. And last year was just a train wreck overall for Cincinnati. Joe Burrow, he was out half the year. T. Higgins, a lot of ball games where he would play, then leave the game, come back, then the next week not 100%. But T. Higgins is healthy going into the season. I still think he's a big-time wide receiver. And this Cincinnati Bengal team, they want to bounce back after last year. It was a train wreck, and a couple years ago, knocked out of the playoffs. So right now, T. Higgins, I believe he still could go out there, make plays, still a young receiver, and hungry for a long-term contract. He could be a breakout candidate once again. 26, George Pickens of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we don't know who's going to be a quarterback for sure. Justin Fields or Russell Wilson for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. But even last season with no quarterback pretty much in Kenny Pickett, Pickens still went out there, had over 1,100 yards. I believe George Pickens is one of the more athletic wide receivers in all pro football. Acrobatic catch receivers as well in the league. If you get it in the vicinity of George Pickens, he's going to most likely come down with the grabs. So George Pickens going 5th, 6th round range in most fantasy drafts. As a back-end number 2, flex 3 receiver, I like George Pickens a lot this season. And if Justin Fields or Russell Wilson could just be decent, it wouldn't be surprising to me if Pickens is a guy who sniffs that top 12 when it's all said and done this year. Number 27, Tank Dell of the Houston Texans. So Tank Dell, he was higher on me, was coming into the year. But now seeing preseason and Stephon Diggs, they traded for him, and they're not going to sit him on the bench. Tank Dell will be the number 3 wide receiver for this Houston Texan team. I still feel like they're going to run a lot of wide receiver sets, have him in the slot as Tank Dell, explosive wide out last year. Very impressive before he went down with injury. But like I said, a lot of great options, receivers deep this year. And Dell's just falling down my board a little bit after getting number 3 wide receiver snaps with Diggs and Nico Collins. Obviously the 1 and 2 on this Texans offense. 28, Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns. I know Amari Cooper last season, 1,250 yards, over 70 catches. Monster year, no doubt about it. Also had a game over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns for the Cleveland Browns. That was with Joe Flacco. But him and Deshaun Watson, over the last couple years, really haven't played. Watson missed the majority of the season with injury last season. Then he was suspended in his first year with Cleveland for the majority of the season as well. But Amari Cooper, he's another wide receiver getting up there in age a little bit, where he might lose a step or two. I thought he looked finished in Dallas, but then he resurged over the last couple seasons with the Cleveland Browns. But like I said, a lot of talented wide receivers and receivers, I believe, were more upside, and that's why I got Cooper at this 28 spot. 29, Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. Zay Flowers, he got off to a hot start last season in his rookie year for the Baltimore Ravens, and then he fizzled out a little bit towards the end, is Zay Flowers. So this Raven offense is going to be high-powered once again with Lamar leading it. Odell Beckham left in free agency. They really didn't add at the receiver position. Him and Rashad Bateman, the top 2 wideouts going in to the year. Obviously, they added Derrick Henry, but Zay Flowers, they're still going to use him as a gadget guy. They're going to use his speed all around the field. And if you could get Zay Flowers as a number 3 receiver flex option, I think that's a slam dunk pick. Number 30, Keenan Allen of the Chicago Bears. I know Keenan Allen, what a season it was last year with the Los Angeles Chargers, but he's really been dropping down ranking boards this year. He's not going to be playing with a quarterback like Justin Herbert, who had great ESP, even though I know Caleb Williams is obviously a talented rookie coming in. Him and Keenan Allen don't have the reps that Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen had. And also, there's a lot of weapons in this offense. DJ Moore's going to get his some weeks. Cole Kmet's still going to make plays in the middle of the field. Rome Odunze, they used a high draft pick on him as well. So Keenan Allen, if he was on another team, less weapons, or let's say he stayed with the Los Angeles Chargers, he most likely would be a top 15, 20 option. But since he's on a Bear team, loaded with a lot of talent, and also coming into training camp 20 pounds overweight, is Keenan Allen. Right now he's down in the rankings. 31, Rashee Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Rashee Rice, I thought he was going to get suspended 100% coming into the season, but as training camp is ending and the regular season is approaching, still no word if Rice is going to get suspended. And even articles coming out that most likely Rice isn't getting suspended this season, where next year is a possibility. So with Hollywood Brown out with the shoulder injury, most likely going to miss the first game or 2, I believe, Hollywood Brown. Even if he's healthy, I think Rashee Rice overall is a better wide receiver. And this Chief team, we know anyway, spreads it out and runs a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. So Rashee Rice was a catalyst last season in helping this Kansas City Chief team get to the promised land and win the Super Bowl, where he had over 70 catches, over 900 yards, and he found the end zone 6 times. It was Rashee Rice. So coming into the year, someone going in that back 5th, 6th round range, I think Rashee Rice once again could go out there and have a good season. Obviously, the suspension, we'll see what happens, but right now, it looks like he's going to get off his Rashee Rice, and I would take him in those rounds like I mentioned. 32, Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders. Yeah, I mean, I might be lower on Terry McLaurin than most people, but this wide receiver position is very deep, and Terry McLaurin's ceiling at this point of his career, I don't think is very high compared to these younger receivers in better offenses and better schemes. So right now, Terry McLaurin, this could be the best quarterback he's played with. Jaden Daniels coming in of his NFL career. We know he's a 1,000-yard receiver each season, but there's a lot of ball games with Terry McLaurin. He just doesn't do much, and then he'll have his initial pop game here and there. But like I said, his ceiling isn't that high still compared to these other wideouts. He's more of a back-end number 2, 3 wide receiver. To me, is scary, Terry, and he's going 5th, 6th round in fantasy leagues, which I don't think is horrible. But like I said, these other players' ceiling is higher, and I'm a little down on McLaurin. 33, Calvin Ridley of the Tennessee Titans. Calvin Ridley signing a big contract in the offseason with this Tennessee Titan team after last year, back after suspension for a year from the NFL. He still put up numbers, over 1,000 yards, had over 70 catches, found the end zone 8 times for the Jaguars. And now with big arm to Will Levis, I think Ridley's going to find his way into some big ball games. And he's going to find his way like last season as well. Games he didn't show up and he put up a few points. But right now, a young quarterback like Will Levis with a big arm, to have a receiver with the talent of a Calvin Ridley, trying to get his legs under him after last season, towards the end of the year, he got it going a little bit. I think Ridley can help fantasy owners as a number 2-3 option, and he's going in that 7th, 8th round range. Number 34, Xavier Worthy of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Worthy, he's been bumping up my draft board over the last couple weeks, especially with the Hollywood Brown injury. In the preseason, Worthy, he's playing that number 2 wide receiver spot next to Rashee Rice in the lineup. And he's got breakaway speed. Going to be a Tyreek Hill type. They're going to try to use him in this offense. No one is Tyreek Hill, obviously, but I'm saying the way they're going to scheme him in this offense is the Kansas City Chiefs. And to play with Patrick Mahomes, Xavier Worthy can have major upside. And he's one of the wide receivers as well that I think can have a breakout season. So right now, coming into the year, starting with Hollywood Brown banged up, playing with Patrick Mahomes is a great situation. And I think he's a solid option this year. 35, Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Chris Godwin last season had a quiet 1,000-yard season under his belt with over 80 catches. And we know Chris Godwin's a PPR machine. This season, new offensive coordinator, I think they're going to play him in the slot more, get better looks, easier catches is Chris Godwin. And Godwin, remember as well, he's only 2 seasons removed from a torn ACL. So this year could be a next step type of thing for Chris Godwin. Him and Baker Mayfield weren't on the same page great as well last year. But even Godwin, not getting a lot of targets like in previous seasons, still went out there and put up decent numbers as a number 3 wide receiver. 36, Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers. I think Christian Watson, he's starting to move up the board as well a little bit. There's no injury coming into the season. Last year, the hamstring was nagging from week 1 and in training camp with Christian Watson, which set him back. But we still saw him go out there in the games he played with Watson and put up some big numbers for this Green Bay Packer team. I remember one game versus the Lions, first drive of the game, puts it up for grabs, love 50-yard catch, and that's the type of play Christian Watson can do. He's got breakaway speed. He could burn any secondary as this Christian Watson, go up, get that jump ball. And we saw it a couple years ago with Aaron Rodgers, where he had 9 touchdowns in the last 6 games of the season, including a 3-touchdown game was Watson for his breakout that season. So right now, Christian Watson, I know people are down on him coming off the injury, but to get him in a spot like this is a good spot, I believe. And he can move up the ranking board quickly as the season goes on. But right now, flex 3 receiver, 37, Deontay Johnson of the Carolina Panthers. Deontay Johnson, it's pretty much the same or a worse situation for him like it was last season. He played with Kenny Pickett last season, now playing with Bryce Young and this Carolina Panther team where they desperately needed a veteran top line receiver. And Deontay Johnson, we know he's still has some of the best hands in the league. Crisp route runner, one of the better underneath route runners as well. But I just don't know what his ceiling really is going to be on this Carolina Panther team. Obviously, defenses are going to load up and try to stop Deontay Johnson. I know Adam Thielen last season had over 100 catches in this offense, but by the second half of the year, he fizzled out. Was Adam Thielen. So right now, like I said, I don't like the ceiling for Deontay Johnson. If he's your number 3 receiver, though, I think I would take that. But if you're taking him as your number 1 or 2 wide receiver, that's not going to be great, I believe, for fantasy owners. 38, Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So a lot of people might think this is too low for Christian Kirk. But the thing is, he wasn't even in the starting lineup. He was playing that slot and 3 receiver in the preseason games behind Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr., who I'm going to mention next is number 39. So Christian Kirk last season, it wasn't a great year. Zay Jones missed the majority of the season. Calvin Ridley was still trying to work out the kinks after being suspended for a season. And Kirk only finished with over 700 yards last year. And like I said, Christian Kirk, he's a good receiver, no doubt about it. But I don't think he's got a high ceiling in this offense with Trevor Lawrence, who's a quarterback that likes spreading the football out. He runs the football a decent amount as well. They got a good running back in Travis Etienne. They used a first-round pick on Brian Thomas Jr., paid Gabe Davis big money as well in free agency. So I think Christian Kirk, as the offseason and the preseason's gone on, his stock's fallen a little bit, and that's why I got him this low. 39, his teammate Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I like a lot of rookies this season on this coming into the year at the receiver position, and Brian Thomas Jr. is one of them. So last year, solid college season, and this is a great draft class with Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, who didn't make this list, Brian Thomas Jr., Rome Odunze. It's a lot of good receivers, Ladd McConkey going into this. But to come into a situation for Brian Thomas to play with Trevor Lawrence, even though I know Lawrence had a down season last year, I still think he could go out there, Brian Thomas, and put up numbers for this Jacksonville Jaguar team of fantasy owners. And right now, where he's going in that 9th to 11th round range is good value, where his teammate Christian Kirk is going to that 7th to 8th round range, where I believe Kirk's ceiling, like I said, isn't as high as a Brian Thomas. But going into the year, I still believe Kirk's going to get a decent amount of looks and targets. Preseason, I know he didn't line up with the starters. But going into the year, Brian Thomas, I think they'll ease him in just a bit. But still, I think he could jump up the rankings as the season goes on. And he was a big-time receiver in college, and the 40th and final receiver I'm ranking going into the season's Rome Odunze of the Chicago Bears. So many people are higher on Odunze than I am coming into the year. But the thing is, you got DJ Moore and Keenan Allen there. I know Allen, he's on a one-year deal, but I don't believe Keenan Allen is washed like many people think he is. I know he gained 20 pounds coming into training camp from his weight last year was Keenan Allen. But Rome Odunze, he's still a rookie. Obviously, they're still going to have DJ Moore there, who's going to get a lot of work. Got DeAndre Swift, Caleb Williams is going to spread that football out. And Odunze, he's going to be in there at times, but also, like I said, Keenan Allen, he's a veteran in this league. He knows how to get open. He's going to get his targets. DJ Moore is going to get his targets. And Odunze, I think, is going to be the number 3 option in the passing game. Obviously, that could change, but it's just my opinion going into the year. So that's the top 40 wide receiver. Like I said, a lot of good wide receivers and some honorable guys left off the list I like going into the year. Ladd McConkey, another rookie, I think he could break out, have a decent year. Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, they're in the mix as well at the wide receiver position. Jalen Polk for the New England Patriots. So those are the guys to keep an eye on. Just didn't crack my top 40s. That's the top 40 wide receivers I'm ranking going into the 2024 season.